In a crowded coffee shop, a man sat alone on his birthday, feeling a pang of loneliness as he realized no one remembered him. Then suddenly, a little girl and her grandfather walked up and quietly asked, "Are you okay?" A small question, but it stirred something he thought he had lost long ago. Then they sat down next to him, sharing their birthday together. What he didn't know was that this small tender moment with two strangers would become the turning point that would change his life forever. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any of our daily stories about kindness. The morning light in Harborview was soft, almost gentle, the kind that usually made the small coastal town feel warm and familiar. But as Evan sat inside Sunrise Brew Cafe, the glow through the window only reminded him how tired he felt. The quiet jazz, the clinking cups, even the smell of fresh pastries, things that normally comforted him, slid past without reaching him. People greeted the baristas by name, chatting in easy tones, while Evan sat alone at his corner table, feeling like he was watching a life he wasn't part of anymore. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup, letting the warmth soak into his fingers. The steam rose in front of his face, then drifted away, just like most things did these days. Evan took a sip of his coffee. Everything in his life was fine, if you looked at it from far enough away. 3 houses, a private jet, a company with more than 5,000 employees. A bank account that had long ago stopped being a concern. And yet here he was, at a little cafe in a little town, on his 38th birthday, with no one to share a simple morning coffee. Earlier, when he'd ordered, the barista had glanced at his card and smiled. "Oh hey, it's your birthday, isn't it?" she'd said, with the easy cheer of someone who thought that was good news. "We do a little treat for birthday folks. You like chocolate?" He'd nodded and watched her pull a small cupcake from the case. She'd added a small blue candle from a jar and set it on a plate next to his coffee. "On the house," she'd said. "Happy birthday, Evan." He'd thanked her, taken the plate and carried it to this corner table. That felt like an hour ago, and also like it had happened to someone else. The cupcake sat untouched now. The frosting still held its neat swirl, the blue candle slightly bent, waiting for someone to care enough to light it. Evan stared at it for a while, his thumb running back and forth along the edge of the saucer. A birthday, he thought, should feel like something. A marker, a turning point, a reason to gather people, at least a phone call or two. His phone lay beside the plate, face down. He had turned the sound off before walking in. He didn't want to hear any notifications. Not today, not after what the last few days had held. Still, even with the sound off, he could hear echoes. His lawyer's voice from 2 days ago, low and careful on the phone. "Evan, I'm afraid it's serious," he'd said. "Dylan didn't just make a mistake, he's been planning this for a while. It's a hostile move. We'll fight it, but you need to be ready." Evan had stood in his office, looking out over the city while his lawyer talked. It was a good view, clean glass, clean streets, clean skyline. It had taken years of hard work and long hours to get that view. Years of smiling in rooms he didn't want to be in. Years of telling himself that once he reached a certain number, a certain size, a certain level, it would all feel worth it. Months he'd asked quietly. "You're sure?" His lawyer had sighed. "I'm sure, I'm sorry." Evan had thanked him, discussed strategies, told him to do whatever was necessary. That was what he knew how to do: respond, move, plan. But when he'd hung up, he had stood there for a long time, fingers resting on the glass, feeling like he was watching someone else's life through a window. Now in the cafe, he traced the edge of his saucer again. Beside that, another voice echoed in his mind. Valerie's voice, softer, but somehow sharper. They had been in his living room the night before last. The floor-to-ceiling windows had shown the city lights behind her, and she had stood with her arms folded, fingers pressed into her own elbows, like she was holding herself together. "I don't want to hurt you," she'd said. I have to be honest now." He'd known what was coming before she spoke the words. He could see it in her eyes, in the way she avoided looking at him directly. "I've been seeing Dylan," she'd said finally. "For a while." "How long is a while?" he'd asked, his voice sounding far away to his own ears. 6 months, she'd replied. "I didn't plan it, it just happened. 6 months, half a year, board meetings, dinners, late work nights, all with his business partner and his fiancée playing a secret game behind his back. He remembered standing very still, hands at his sides, remembered looking around his own living room, at the expensive furniture, the art he'd been told was important, the big empty space. He remembered thinking, of course it's him, of course it's now. He hadn't yelled, he hadn't begged, he hadn't asked why. Somewhere deep down, he already knew the answer. Dylan was charming. Dylan knew how to make people feel seen. Dylan had time. Evan had everything but time. Now the memory of that conversation flickered across his mind, like a scene from a film he didn't want to watch again. He tightened his grip on the cup, then forced his hand to relax. As if that weren't enough, there had been his sister's message, sent late last night, long after he'd turned off most of the lights in his penthouse. Evan, I'm in trouble. I need $40,000. I messed up. Please, you're the only one who can fix this. No happy birthday tomorrow. No how are you holding up, just the same old pattern, panic, crisis, and the assumption that he would swoop in and make it all disappear. He'd sat at his kitchen counter, the fridge humming behind him, the city lights shining through the windows, reading the message over and over. The words had blurred into one thought. You're the only one who can fix this. That was what he did. He fixed things. He solved problems. He plugged holes in other people's lives with money and effort, and silent understanding. But as he sat in Sunrise Brew Cafe, with the morning light slanting in and the smell of cinnamon hanging in the air, one question kept nudging at him. Who fixes you, Evan? He sighed, setting the coffee back down on the table. The cupcake, with its little candle, seemed to look back at him. A small token of celebration from a stranger. It somehow felt more sincere than the fancy gifts he had received in past years from people who wanted to stay on his good side. He realized, with a quiet, startling clarity, that there was no one he wanted to call, no one he felt he could call, and simply say, I'm hurting. I need you. He thought of staying there all day, just sitting, watching other people move around him, letting his mind go blank. The idea almost felt comforting, but he knew he couldn't. There were calls to make, messages to answer, problems that wouldn't wait. Before he could decide what to do next, he shifted in his chair and reached for his phone. It slid under his fingers and slipped off the edge of the table. He watched, as if in slow motion, as the phone hit the floor, bounced once, and skidded across the wooden boards, disappearing under the next table. Great, he muttered, pushing his chair back. He stood up and bent down to reach under the table. As he did, his hip bumped the corner of his own table. The coffee cup tipped, and the remaining coffee spilled across the surface, dripping over the edge and splashing onto his sleeve. He jerked back with a sharp breath, as the warmth soaked through the fabric. Easy there, a voice said. Evan looked up to see an older man stepping toward him. He appeared to be in his early 70s, with weathered hands, a gentle face, and a flannel shirt tucked neatly into worn jeans. His posture was slightly stiff, like someone who'd worked with his body his whole life, but didn't complain about it. You all right? The man asked, already reaching for napkins from a nearby counter. Yes, I'm fine, Evan said, though his tone made it sound like a question. I'm really sorry, I should have been more careful. It happens, the man said, crouching down to blot the spill on the floor. Coffee's a slippery little thing. Evan instinctively reached down as well, trying to help, but the man waved him off gently. I've got it, he said. You don't need to get your sleeves any worse than they already are. I appreciate it, Evan said, a little awkwardly. Thank you. As he spoke, a small figure crouched down beside him. A girl, maybe 7, peeked under the table with remarkable focus. Her ponytail had come loose in places, strands of dark hair brushing her cheeks. She wore a yellow sweater with a tiny embroidered flower near the collar, and her sneakers had the soft wear of long playtimes. I see it, she said. A moment later, she emerged holding Evan's phone carefully in both hands. It didn't go far. She placed it gently on his table, then took a napkin and lightly dabbed the screen. You should let it rest for a bit, she said, looking up at him with wide, earnest eyes. If you use it right away, it might get upset. Her voice was serious, the way a child speaks when sharing something very important. Evan blinked at her, surprised, touched, and not sure what to say. Thank you, he finally managed. I really mean it. both of you. He reached out and shook the older man's hand first, because it felt polite, but his eyes kept drifting back to the little girl. You didn't have to rush in like that, he said, gently. I appreciate your help. It's been a while since someone helped me just because. The girl studied him for a moment, her head tilting slightly as though she were trying to read a sign he was holding. You look sad, she said quietly. Her grandfather straightened with a small grunt and rubbed a hand on his knee. Sweetheart, let's not. It's okay, Evan said softly. He meant it. She's just being honest. You look really sad, the girl repeated, her eyebrows knitting together. Are you okay, mister? The question hit him harder than he expected, not because of what she said, but because of how she said it, simple, direct, without judgment. He began, then paused. He had board-ready answers prepared for everything in life, for investors, for employees, for crises, but none of them fit here. It's been a rough week, he said, which was the closest he could get to the truth. The girl nodded knowingly. Sometimes Grandpa has rough weeks too. When he does, we come here, and he drinks coffee, and I get hot chocolate with lots of whipped cream, and we tell each other good things so the bad things don't win. Her grandfather exhaled, looking embarrassed and touched all at once. She listens more than I realize, he said. Something loosened in Evan's chest, just a little. He noticed the cupcake on his table then, sitting there with its sad unlit candle. The melted coffee that hadn't spilled clung to the plate's edge. It looked like a tiny party had started and stopped in the same moment. He glanced back at them. I'm Evan, he said finally, introducing himself because it felt right. Thank you both. Really, the older man straightened a little more fully and offered his hand again, this time with a small warm smile. Harold Bennett, he said. And this is my granddaughter Lily. Lily gave a small wave. Hi Evan, she said. Sorry you're having a rough week. Her sincerity nearly undid him. He cleared his throat softly. Thank you, that means a lot. He paused, then added with a small, almost shy smile, would you two like to sit for a bit? I have a birthday cupcake that's more cupcake than I need. Lily gasped. It's your birthday? Harold chuckled. She has a built-in sensor for celebrations. Evan nodded. Yeah, today. And you're here all by yourself? Lily asked, surprised. Yes, he said simply. There was no point in explaining. Lily frowned at the cupcake, then at him. You shouldn't eat that alone. It feels wrong. Is that a rule? He asked gently. It is now, she said with certainty. Harold laughed under his breath. She means well. It's your birthday. If you'd like company, we'd be honored. Evan nodded. I'd like that very much. They pulled up 2 chairs. Lily sat first, swinging her legs as she stared at the cupcake like it was a treasure. Harold took his seat more slowly, easing into it the way older men do when joints are stiff but spirits are willing. You want me to light the candle? Lily asked. Yeah, Evan said softly. Let's do it right. Harold produced a lighter from his pocket, old habits maybe, and guided Lily's small hand as she flicked it. The candle flame caught, glowing warmly between them. Now you have to make a wish, Lily said. Evan looked at the flickering flame, then closed his eyes. He didn't wish for repair of the company, or for Valerie to return, or for his sister's life to suddenly straighten out. He wished for something quieter, something simple, a moment that feels like this one. He opened his eyes and blew out the candle. Lily clapped once, delighted. Good. Now it's a real birthday. Harold used a plastic knife from the condiments table to cut the cupcake into 3 uneven pieces. Lily cheerfully picked the largest piece without shame, and Evan found himself smiling at the sight. They ate slowly, talking about nothing and everything. Harold told him about their small rental house near the harbor, the stubborn garden that grew marigolds but refused tomatoes, and the odd jobs he took around town. Keeps the lights on and keeps me moving, he said. That's all I need. Lily talked about school, about her best friend Maya, about how she once outran a seagull who tried to steal her sandwich. It was a big seagull, she said. Grandpa said it was probably a teenager, which explains the attitude. Harold coughed to hide a laugh. Don't repeat everything I say, kiddo. Evan found himself laughing more than he had in months. Small quiet laughs that came easily. When he asked Lily what she wanted to be in the school play this fall, she answered without hesitation. "A tree," she said proudly. "Trees stay in one place and listen to everyone. They're important," he nodded solemnly. "Sounds like the best role." "I think so," she said. As the minutes passed, the knot in Evan's chest loosened, something he hadn't felt in a long time. When their plates were empty and the candle was a small smear of wax, Harold checked his watch. "We should get going," he said. "Got a few things to do today." Lily pouted slightly. "Can we come back next Sunday?" "We always do," Harold said gently. She turned to Evan. "Will you be here next Sunday?" Evan hesitated only for a second before answering. "I think I will," he said. Her smile grew wide and bright. Harold stood with a soft grunt. Evan rose as well. "Thank you for sharing your table and your cake," Harold said, shaking his hand. "Not everyone would do that." "Thank you for everything," Evan replied. Without warning, Lily stepped forward and hugged him around the waist. It was quick and warm and so honest that he froze for half a second before placing a gentle hand on her back. "Happy birthday, Evan," she said into his shirt. "Thank you, Lily," he said, his voice quietly thick. They said their goodbyes and headed toward the door. Evan watched them leave, the bell above the door jingling softly as they stepped out into the sunlight. He remained still for a long moment, looking at the empty chairs across from him. The cafe felt warmer now. He gathered his things, slipped his still silent phone into his pocket, and stepped outside. The harbor air greeted him, clean, cool, carrying the faint scent of salt. Seagulls called overhead, and distant waves lapped against the docks. He walked slowly toward the water, each step lighter than the one before. At the edge of the harbor, he stood still, letting the morning breeze touch his face. He thought of the week behind him, the betrayal, the lies, the loneliness, and then of the small moment that had just happened. A spilled coffee, a rescued phone, a child's honest question. "Are you okay, mister?" He took a slow breath and let it out. Maybe he wasn't okay, not yet. But for the first time in a long while, he felt like he wasn't entirely alone either, and that small truth, quiet and fragile, was enough to carry him through the morning. He looked over the water, and a thought settled into his chest with a gentle certainty. "Next Sunday, I know exactly where I want to be." Sunday came quicker than Evan expected. All week long, between board meetings, back and forth calls with his lawyer, late-night attempts to organize the chaos at Carter Global, he kept finding his thoughts drifting back to Sunrise Brew Cafe, back to a spilled cup of coffee, back to a man with calm eyes and a little girl who somehow saw through him without trying. More than once, in the quiet half-hour between brushing his teeth and forcing himself to sleep, he replayed Lily's voice in his mind. "Are you okay, mister?" No one had asked him that in years. Not for real. The week had been brutal. Dylan's maneuver was more aggressive than expected. Shareholders were nervous. Board members kept calling to check in, which really meant they wanted reassurance their money was safe. Even small tasks had felt heavy. His penthouse, with its smooth marble floors and floor-to-ceiling city view, seemed colder and quieter each night. He had kept the TV on just for noise, but the voices in it felt like they belonged to strangers. But through all of it, one promise sat like a warm pilot light inside him. Next Sunday, same cafe, same table if he was lucky. He didn't know why that mattered so much, but it did. By the time Sunday morning arrived, Harborview was covered in a soft, early glow. Thin clouds drifted above the water, and the air smelled faintly of salt and something sweet from a nearby bakery. Evan parked his car farther away than usual, choosing to walk the last couple of blocks. He didn't want to rush this morning, not after the week he'd had. When he reached the cafe door, he hesitated, not because he didn't want to go in, but because he suddenly worried he might look foolish for hoping. Maybe Harold and Lily didn't come every Sunday. Maybe last week had been a one-time fluke. Maybe he was a grown man building his emotional stability around a little girl's kindness. He let out a quiet breath. Whatever happens, happens. Go inside. He pushed open the door. Warm air, coffee, cinnamon, quiet jazz, just like last time. A few customers turned lazily to look at him. None of them were the ones he was looking for. He picked up his coffee from the counter, exchanged a few polite words with the barista, then found a seat near the window, the same table as before. He tried to look casually out the window, but every time the bell above the door jingled, his heart gave a small embarrassing leap. He was halfway through his coffee, trying not to look like someone waiting for something, when he heard a small voice. Evan. He looked up. Lily was running toward him, a small backpack bouncing on her shoulders, her ponytail lifting with each step. Harold followed close behind, slower but smiling. "Well, would you look at that?" Harold said as they reached the table. "We didn't expect to see you this early." Evan stood up, unable to stop smiling. "I'd tell you I was just in the neighborhood, but that'd be a lie." Lily dropped her backpack on the chair next to him. "We got here late because Grandpa couldn't find his good shoes." Harold rolled his eyes. "She makes me sound older than I am." "You are old," Lily said matter-of-factly. "But not super old, just medium old." Evan laughed and Harold grinned, shaking his head. "You two want breakfast?" Evan asked. "My treat, that's kind of you," Harold said. "But we can take care of ourselves." "Please?" Evan said gently. "I'd like to, really." Harold studied him for a moment, just long enough to show he understood this wasn't about money. He nodded. "All right," he said. "We'll take you up on it." Lily clapped once. "I want pancakes. But only one pancake because Grandpa says I get too jumpy when I have two." "That's true," Harold said dryly. "She turned into a human hummingbird last time." Breakfast arrived in warm plates that steamed in the morning light. Eggs, toast, pancakes, bacon. Simple food but hearty. The three of them talked as they ate, the conversation moving easily between Lily's school stories, Harold's tales from work, and the small quiet things that made up their week. Evan found himself listening more than talking. It felt good to listen. Good to be part of something small and ordinary. Lily told him about a classmate who'd brought a pet snail for show and tell. "It kept trying to escape," she said, wide-eyed. "Miss Harper was scared it'd get squished by accident, so she put it in a shoebox. But it climbed out anyway." "Snails don't care about rules." Harold shook his head. "Snails, seagulls, second graders, none of them listen." Evan laughed, feeling something warm blooming inside him. After breakfast, Lily excused herself to go look at the pastry case, pressing her hands and nose against the glass as if it were filled with jewels. Harold leaned back, letting out a sigh that had more weight in it than age. "You all right?" Evan asked. Harold nodded, rubbing a thumb along the rim of his coffee cup. "Yeah, just tired. Work's been keeping me busy." "Furniture repairs?" Evan asked. "Mostly," Harold said. "And some other things. Fixing fences, helping with odd jobs, trying to make rent. Not complaining, work's work." He paused. "Last month wasn't great. Jobs slowed down and with the truck acting up," he trailed off. "The truck?" Evan repeated. "Yeah," Harold said. "Old thing. Been giving me trouble. Mechanic says it needs a few repairs, but money's tighter than I like to admit." He said the last part quietly, as if uncomfortable with how it sounded. Evan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "If you ever need help," Harold lifted a hand gently. "I appreciate the offer. I really do, but I've managed a long time on my own. Pride's a stubborn thing, you know?" Evan nodded. "I understand, but I meant what I said last week. That day, you and Lily gave me something I didn't know I needed." Harold looked away for a moment, toward the pastry case where Lily was pressing her face closer to the glass. His expression softened. "She has a way of doing that," he said. "She does," Evan agreed. Harold looked back at him. "We're okay for now, but thank you." Evan accepted the answer, though it left a small ache in his chest. Later that morning, after a second cup of coffee and a few more stories from Lily, the three of them walked outside together. The air had warmed a little, carrying the scent of the ocean. "We're heading to the harbor," Lily announced, "to feed the ducks." Harold raised a brow. "They're not ducks, they're geese. They act like ducks," she said firmly. Evan chuckled. "Mind if I join you?" Lily lit up. "Yes, come on." Harold nodded. "We'd like that." They walked down the sidewalk together, the town moving slowly around them. People strolled past, dogs pulling gently on leashes, a few shops unlocking their doors for the day. By the time they reached the harbor, the tide was rolling in with small waves that sloshed against the wood. Sunlight reflected in thin lines across the water. Lily ran ahead to the railing, pulling a piece of bread from her coat pocket. "Grandpa, look," she yelled. "Duck geese." A group of geese glided toward her, making low honking sounds. Evan leaned on the railing beside Harold. "She has a lot of energy." "That she does," Harold said softly. "Her parents, they had the same spark. Lily got it from them." He rarely mentioned them, so Evan waited quietly. "My daughter Lily's mom was full of life," Harold continued. "And my son-in-law was the kind of man who could make a whole room laugh without trying. Losing them." He stopped, swallowing. "Losing them hit hard. But that little girl saved me right back." He let out a slow breath. "Kids do that sometimes," he said. "They don't even know they're doing it." Evan nodded. "She's special." "She is," Harold said. They stood in companionable silence for a few moments, watching Lily scatter bread to the geese. Then Harold said, almost hesitantly, "What about you, son? You mentioned things were rough. Anything you want to talk about?" Evan didn't want to. Not really. He didn't want to bring in business jargon or heavy betrayal into this gentle morning. But Harold's voice had the kind of quiet weight that made people answer honestly without feeling forced. "My business partner tried to push me out," he said. "And my fiancée left. I found out she was seeing him." Harold looked at him, eyes soft with understanding. "That's a lot." "It is," Evan said. "More than I thought I'd feel." "And your family?" Harold asked gently. Evan paused. "If they call it's for money." "I'm sorry," Harold said simply. Strangely, it helped. No questions, no pity, just understanding. Evan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Coming here last week," he said. "And today, it helped more than you know." Harold nodded. "Good. Everyone deserves a few bright spots." They spent another 20 minutes at the harbor before Lily declared she was cold and insisted they head back. When they reached the corner where their paths split, Evan found himself hoping their goodbye didn't feel so final. But Harold smiled, offering a wave. "Next Sunday. I'll be here," Evan said. "Me too," Lily added. "And maybe I'll bring a snail." "Please don't," Harold murmured. Evan laughed, and they parted ways. He walked back to his car feeling lighter than he had in weeks. That evening, he sat on his couch replaying the day in his mind. He kept seeing Harold smile, hearing Lily's laugh, feeling the warmth of the morning coffee shared with company. He remembered how the cafe's small sounds had felt different with them at the table, less sharp, more like home. When he finally drifted off to sleep, he didn't dream of the boardroom or Valerie or the takeover. The next week moved more quickly. Work was still intense, meetings, calls, contingency plans, but the heaviness didn't sit in his chest quite as tightly. He found himself smiling unexpectedly when something reminded him of Lily, a seagull perched outside his office window, a child laughing in the elevator, even a cupcake in a bakery case. By the time Sunday came around again, he was more ready for it than he admitted. Sunrise Brew Cafe was livelier that morning. People crowded the tables, chatting, sipping coffee, their coats draped over their chairs. Evan arrived early, and managed to secure their usual corner table. He had just taken a sip of coffee when the bell above the door jingled, and a familiar little figure burst in. "Evan," Lily ran over, backpack bouncing, cheeks flushed pink from the cold. "You beat us again," Harold said with a smile. "You're going to make this a habit." "I hope so," Evan said. They settled in, and breakfast arrived quickly. Pancakes for Lily, oatmeal for Harold, and eggs and toast for Evan. As they ate, Evan found himself wanting to ask about Harold's work, the truck, the rent, but he didn't want to overstep. He waited for the right moment. It came sooner than expected. Harold sighed quietly as he stirred his oatmeal. "Tough week?" Evan asked gently. Harold hesitated. "Yeah, money's tight this month, rent's due. And the truck gave out 2 days ago. Mechanic says it'll be at least a few hundred." "You need the truck to take Lily to school," Evan said. Harold nodded. "Yeah, and to get to jobs. Hard to fix things for folks if you can't even get to their houses." Evan set his fork down. "Harold," he said softly, "let me help." Harold stiffened. "Evan, please," Evan said. "I'm not trying to insult you. I just want to do something good." Harold stared down at his oatmeal. "You've got a good heart, son," he said slowly. "Really, but I don't want you to think we need rescuing." "I don't," Evan said. "But helping you helps me too." Harold looked up, meeting his eyes. You sure about that? Yes, Evan said simply. Harold didn't answer right away, he just nodded slowly, his jaw tightening in quiet emotion. Lily, oblivious to the tension, leaned forward. Are we talking about the truck again? It makes weird noises when it's sick. Yes, Harold said. The truck is very sick. Do you need more bread for the ducks? She asked Evan brightly. He laughed. Always. They spent the rest of breakfast talking about silly things, favorite colors, school cafeteria lunches, the mysterious green beans incident. Lily refused to fully explain. But the heaviness in Harold's shoulders lingered. That afternoon, Evan made a decision, not to overstep, not to replace Harold's independence, but to help in a way that didn't make Harold feel indebted. He called a mobile mechanic and arranged for the truck to be repaired that very evening. Don't mention who called, Evan said firmly. Just take care of it. The mechanic agreed. Evan drove to Harold Street after sunset, parking 2 houses away so he wouldn't be seen. He watched from a distance as the mobile repair van pulled up to Harold's driveway. Tools clinked. The engine coughed, sputtered, roared back to life. Lights came on inside the house. Harold stepped out. His hand went to his mouth. He looked stunned. Lily dashed out behind him, arms raised. It's alive, she shouted. The truck isn't sick anymore. Evan watched from the shadows. A warm feeling spread through his chest, something like relief, something like joy, but also something quieter, deeper. I can do something good, something that matters to someone. He drove home slowly, and that night he slept better than he had in months. Over the next few weeks, Sundays became a tradition. Evan picked up Lily from school concerts and choir practices. He helped Harold repair the loose fence in their backyard. He carried heavy bags of soil for their stubborn garden. He taught Lily simple math tricks that made her giggle when she got them right. Sometimes he brought pastries from the cafe. Sometimes he brought nothing at all. What mattered wasn't what he brought. It was that he came. The 3 of them built a rhythm without planning to. Evan's penthouse felt less like home. Harold's small living room felt more like it. He didn't withdraw from work, but he didn't let it swallow him whole, either. When board members pushed him to counterattack Dylan aggressively, he listened, but he didn't move with desperation. He knew who he was fighting for now. He knew what kind of leader he wanted to be, and he knew kindness mattered more than posture. One Sunday afternoon, after Lily had fallen asleep with her head on Evan's arm, Harold glanced at him quietly. You're good with her, Harold said softly. Evan looked down at the sleeping child. Her hair had fallen loose, her hand resting lightly against his side. I care about her, he said. About both of you. Harold nodded slowly. She thinks the world of you, he said. You know that, right? Evan swallowed, emotion rising unexpectedly in his throat. I'm starting to realize that, he said. Harold studied him. Just don't disappear on her, he said quietly. She's had enough people in her life disappear. I won't, Evan said. I promise. Harold nodded once, and something settled between them, unspoken, steady, important. Not everything was easy. One afternoon, Evan stepped into the cafe to find Valerie and Dylan sitting at a booth near the counter. They looked up as he walked in. Valerie's eyes narrowed slightly. Dylan smirked. Well, Dylan drawled, look who it is. Evan felt his stomach drop. Valerie leaned back in her seat. Evan, what are you doing here with them? With who? He asked coolly. Those people you've been entertaining, she said. Your little charity project. Evan's eyes hardened. Their names are Harold and Lily. Dylan snorted. Evan, come on. You're a CEO. You have an image. You can't go parading around with decent people. Evan interrupted sharply. Valerie flushed. You're being ridiculous. No, Evan said quietly. For the first time in years I'm not. He walked past them, ignoring the way Dylan muttered something under his breath. He found Harold and Lily at their usual table. Lily ran to him with delight. Harold greeted him with a warm nod. He sat with them, listened to Lily talk about her school project, and felt something inside him settle like a stone in place. Valerie and Dylan didn't matter anymore. This small, imperfect, beautiful life did. As winter turned towards spring, sunlight stretched longer across Harborview. Flowers bloomed along the sidewalks, and Evan found himself wanting to be around Harold and Lily more than anything. One Sunday morning, after breakfast, Harold stood with him on the sidewalk, while Lily played with sidewalk chalk nearby. "You've been good to us," Harold said quietly. "Better than most." Evan shook his head. "You've been good to me." Harold looked down, rubbing his thumb along the brim of his cap. "I'm not getting younger, Evan," he said. "And Lily, she's everything I've got." Evan nodded. "I know." Harold swallowed. "If something ever happens to me," he said slowly, "I'd want her to be with someone who cares for her. Someone she trusts." Evan's heart tightened. "I do care," he whispered. "I know you do," Harold said. "And she does too." They stood in silence for a moment, the morning sun warm on their backs. Evan looked over at Lily, chalk dust on her jeans, drawing a bright yellow sun on the sidewalk. He thought of her laughter, her questions, her hugs, the way she reached for him when she was tired, and a quiet realization settled deep in his chest. "I love her, not as a visitor, not as a friend, but as someone who wanted to stay." Harold looked at him, and nodded slightly, as though he could sense the shift inside Evan. "You're good for her," he said softly, "and she's good for you." Evan swallowed hard. "Harold," he said, voice trembling, if you ever needed me to be more in her life, I would be." "Gladly." Harold's jaw worked as he blinked away sudden emotion. "I know," he whispered. "And that's why I'm telling you this." Lily ran up to them then, holding 2 fistfuls of chalk. "Look," she giggled. "I drew us, Grandpa and me and Evan." On the sidewalk, 3 stick figures held hands under a bright yellow sun. Harold laughed softly. Evan smiled, his chest tightening with something warm and overwhelming. The picture wasn't perfect. The lines were crooked, the colors smudged, but it was real. And for the first time in years, Evan felt part of something that didn't require effort, money or performance. Something simple, something kind, something that felt like the beginning of a family. He crouched beside Lily. "It's perfect," he said quietly. And he meant every word. Spring arrived early in Harborview that year. The sun felt warmer, the breeze softer, and small wild flowers appeared in patches of grass that had looked tired for months. Everything in town seemed to be waking up. But on one mild Saturday morning, when the sky was a clear gentle blue, and the air smelled faintly of salt and soil, something happened that caught Evan completely off guard. He had planned to stop by Harold's house around 10. Nothing formal, nothing arranged, just a small visit. He'd picked up a bag of groceries, fresh bread, a few vegetables, and a box of the marshmallow-filled cookies Lily liked. When he turned down Harold's street, he noticed something immediately out of place. Harold's front door was wide open. Evan parked quickly, heart starting to hammer. He stepped out of his car, and hurried up the path. "Harold," he called. "You home?" No answer. He stepped inside. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your stomach drop, not peaceful, not empty, but wrong. A chair was tipped slightly off-center in the living room, and a mug lay on its side on the small rug, still dripping coffee. Evan felt his pulse thudding in his throat. "Harold," he called again, louder this time. Then he heard it, a faint sound from the backyard. Not a cry, not a yell, just a dull muted thump. He moved quickly toward the sliding door, and shoved it open. Harold was on the ground near the fence, sitting against it with one knee bent, and the other leg stretched out awkwardly. His hand pressed against his chest, and his face was pale. Beside him, Lily crouched with both hands on his arm, her eyes wide with fear. "Grandpa got dizzy," she whispered. "He fell." Evan was by their side in seconds. "Harold," he said, kneeling next to him. "Hey, look at me. What happened?" Harold managed a small thin smile, stood up too fast, got lightheaded. Nothing to panic about, but his voice was breathy, and sweat dotted his forehead. Lily clung to his sleeve. "He scared me," she whispered. "He fell really hard." Evan swallowed back the rising fear in his chest. "We're going to the hospital," he said firmly. "Now." Harold tried to wave him off. No, I'm fine, just need a minute." "You scared Lily," Evan said softly. "I know," Harold murmured, looking ashamed. I didn't mean to." "Come on," Evan said. "Lean on me." Between the two of them, Evan supporting most of his weight, Lily clutching his other hand, they got Harold up slowly and into the car. His legs trembled, and he leaned into Evan more heavily than he wanted to admit. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Every red light felt like an insult. Every passing second felt like one too many. Lily sat in the back seat, her small hands gripping the sides of her jacket so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "Is he going to die?" she asked in a whisper. "No," Evan said firmly, glancing at her in the mirror. "He's still talking. He's still awake. We're getting him help." She stared at Harold's reflection in the window. "He can't die. He just can't." "Hey," Evan said gently. "We're not thinking that way. We're doing what needs to be done to help him." She nodded, even if the fear in her eyes didn't fade. Inside the hospital, everything happened fast. Nurses swept Harold into an exam room. A doctor asked questions about medications, heart issues, previous spells. They took blood, ran tests, hooked him to monitors. Evan and Lily sat in the waiting area, both holding still in a way that wasn't natural for either of them. The chairs were stiff, the air smelled of antiseptic, and somewhere down the hall the beep of a monitor sounded faintly like a quiet alarm. Lily leaned into Evan's side, tiny and trembling. "He never gets dizzy," she whispered. "Never like that." Evan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, steadying her. "You did the right thing calling for help." Her chin quivered. "I was scared. I didn't know what to do." "You did exactly what you should have," Evan said. "You stayed with him. You kept talking to him. That helps more than you know." After what felt like a small lifetime, a doctor walked toward them, her clipboard tucked against her chest. "Family of Harold Bennett?" she asked. Evan stood. Lily stood right beside her. The doctor smiled gently. "He's stable. It appears to be exhaustion and mild dehydration. His heart is working harder than it used to, but we didn't find anything immediately life-threatening." Lily exhaled so deeply it was almost a sob. "He needs rest," the doctor continued. "Real rest. No heavy lifting, no long days. He needs to take this seriously." Evan nodded. "Can we see him?" "You may," she said. "One at a time. Keep it calm." Lily looked up at Evan, her lower lip trembling. "Can you go first?" I don't want him to see me cry." "Of course." Harold looked smaller in the hospital bed. The stiff white sheets made him seem fragile in a way Evan wasn't used to seeing. Machines beeped softly. The overhead lights cast a sterile glow on his face, but when he saw Evan he gave a faint smile. "You look worse than I do," he said. Evan pulled a chair close. "You scared us." "Scared myself too," Harold admitted. "Guess I pushed it too far with that fence." "Harold," Evan said quietly, "we need to talk about something." The older man looked at him steadily. "Lily, yes." Harold closed his eyes for a moment. "I've known this day might come. She's all I've got. But I'm not the same man I was 10 years ago." "You're still a good man," Evan said. "Maybe so," Harold replied. "But I'm getting older, my heart's tired. I've been telling myself I'd make arrangements one day, but I kept pushing it, pretending I had infinite time." He looked directly at Evan. "If anything happens to you," Evan said, "I'll be the one to take care of Lily. Is that okay?" Harold held his breath. "I want it," Harold said softly. "But I want it in writing. Not just a promise, a plan, guardianship, maybe adoption someday, something official." Evan swallowed. "I've already talked to my lawyer." Harold blinked in surprise. "You've already talked to your lawyer?" "Yes," Evan said. "A few days ago, I asked what it would take to make sure I could step in if anything happened to you." Emotion flickered across Harold's face. Gratitude, relief, a little grief, and something like hope. "You care about her," he whispered. "I love her," Evan said. "And I care about you too." Harold looked away for a moment, blinking back tears. "Good," he murmured. "Good." The door opened slightly. "She's waiting," the nurse said gently. Evan nodded. "She's scared," he told Harold. "Talk to her." "I will," Harold said. Evan squeezed his hand before stepping out. In the hallway he knelt so Lily could see his face. "He wants to see you," he said gently. "Is he mad that I called you?" she whispered. "No," Evan said, brushing a tear from her cheek. "He's proud of you." She nodded, took a trembling breath and walked into the room. Evan sat outside, hands clasped together, staring at the scuffed linoleum. Minutes later, Lily re-emerged and crawled into his lap without a word. He held her quietly until her breathing evened out. Harold stayed overnight for observation. The next morning he was discharged with strict instructions and several new medications. Evan drove them home slowly. When Harold stepped inside his house, he sighed at the familiar space, soft light, little kitchen, the chair with the quilt. Lily hovered protectively, refusing to let him stand without at least one hand on something. "Sweetheart," Harold said gently, "you're allowed to blink, you know." She scowled. "Nope. Not happening." Evan tried not to smile. He helped Harold settle into the recliner, fetched a blanket, and made him a cup of tea. Lily sat on the rug in front of him, watching like a guard dog in pigtails and sneakers. Harold sipped his tea. "All right," he said softly. "I know we said we'd make this official. I meant it. I want Evan to be the person for Lily." Evan sat on the couch, hands folded. "So do I," he said. Lily looked between them. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means," Harold said gently, "that if something ever happens to me, Evan would be the one who takes care of you." Lily turned to Evan. Like a dad?" Evan's voice was soft. "Yes, something like that. If you'd want that." She blinked several times, as if trying to absorb it. "I do," she whispered. "I want that." The three of them sat in silence for a moment, heavy and full and tender. Then Lily crawled into Evan's lap, rested her head under his chin, and said, "You already feel like my almost dad." Evan's eyes stung. He wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the soft, warm smell of her hair. Harold watched with quiet, deep affection. Then Harold said softly, "It's settled." The next few days were filled with conversations about paperwork, medical updates, and the quiet but enormous shift happening in all of their lives. Evan met with his lawyer again. "We'll draft a guardianship agreement with Harold's consent," the attorney said. "That will make you the legal fallback if anything happens." "And adoption?" Evan asked. His lawyer nodded. "That can follow if or when Harold chooses it, one step at a time." Evan left the office with a folder full of documents and a heart full of something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. Real purpose. Not financial, not professional, human. One evening after work, Evan returned to Harold's house with takeout from Lily's favorite diner. The house glowed warm from the windows. He could hear faint music from inside, something old, something soft. When he stepped in, Lily ran to him. "Evan, we're drawing." She tugged him toward the living room where paper and markers were spread across the floor. On one of the pages she had drawn three figures, her Harold and Evan, standing in front of a house. Above them was a sun with a big smiley face. "This is us," she said proudly. "This is our family." Harold looked down at the picture, and then up at Evan. "She's on to something," Harold murmured. Evan sat down on the floor beside Lily and picked up a marker. "What are we missing?" he asked. "Maybe a dog," Lily said. "Or maybe a garden." "A garden," Harold repeated dryly. "The tomatoes would commit mutiny." "That's because you don't sing to them," Lily said. "They don't deserve my singing," Harold replied. Evan laughed. "I'll sing to them," Lily gasped. "Really?" "Sure," Evan said, "but I make no promises about tomato happiness." She giggled and went back to coloring. Harold leaned back in his chair, watching them with a look that mixed peace with a thread of worry. Later, after Lily went to bed, Harold gestured for Evan to sit with him. "You sure about all this?" Harold asked softly. "Absolutely," Evan said. Harold nodded, letting out a slow breath. "Good. She needs someone young enough to keep up with her." "I can try," Evan said with a smile. Harold raised a brow. "She's faster than she looks, I've noticed." They sat quietly for a moment. "You're good for her," Harold said softly. "And she's good for you. Maybe better than anyone I've ever seen." "She feels like home," Evan admitted. Harold's eyes softened. "Then don't be afraid to make this real. I know I'm not going to be around forever, but I want to leave this world knowing she's safe." Evan's chest tightened. "She will be. I promise." Over the next few weeks Harold recovered slowly. Lily hovered less, though she still kept a watchful eye. Evan visited almost daily, helping with dinner, fixing things around the house, taking Lily to school when Harold felt tired. Sometimes he wondered whether he was intruding, but Harold always smiled when he saw him. "Family doesn't intrude," Harold said one evening, as if reading his thoughts. "They show up." Evan held on to that sentence. The more he showed up, the more he realized something unexpected. He was happiest in this small, imperfect house, sitting at a cluttered table reviewing spelling words or helping Harold adjust a cabinet hinge. His penthouse felt like a museum now, silent, cold, unnecessary. The shift was subtle but profound. His priorities changed, his heart changed, his definitions of family and purpose changed. He wasn't chasing success anymore. He was chasing belonging, and he had found it. About a month after Harold's fall, on a calm Sunday morning, the three of them walked along the harbor. The water glittered under the sun. A few boats bobbed gently in their slips. The smell of grilled fish drifted faintly from a nearby food stand. "Grandpa says we can get ice cream," Lily declared, "but only if you get some too." "I'll make that sacrifice," Evan said solemnly. "Good," she said. "Ice cream tastes better when people eat it together." They walked to a bench overlooking the water. Lily sat between them, holding both their hands. A simple moment, but it carried weight. Harold looked out over the ocean. "You know," he said, "your life doesn't always go the way you think it will." "Mine hasn't," Evan said quietly. "Mine neither," Harold replied. "But sometimes the wrong turns lead you right where you're supposed to be." Lily leaned her head against Evan's shoulder. "I like our wrong turns," she said. He smiled and kissed the top of her head. "I do too," he whispered. Harold watched them with quiet satisfaction. "When the time comes," Harold said softly, "you'll be her father in every way that matters." Evan's breath caught. "I'm ready," he said. "Whenever you are." They sat there, grandfather, granddaughter, and the man becoming something deeper than a friend, listening to the ocean move gently around them. The breeze lifted Lily's hair, the sun warmed their backs, and something solid, something lasting settled into place between them. A promise, a future, a family. Act 3. Closed not with sudden drama or grand declarations, but with three people sharing a simple bench on a quiet morning, hands intertwined, hearts steady, and a new chapter quietly forming on the horizon. Evan breathed in the salt air and knew, with a certainty deeper than anything his business life had ever given him, "This is where I belong, with them, in this life, in this family." The day they went to court, Harbor View woke up under a clear blue sky. The air was crisp but gentle, with a light breeze going through the streets and rattling the new green leaves on the trees. Evan parked the car carefully in front of the modest county courthouse, his hands steady on the wheel, even though his heart wasn't steady at all. In the back seat, Lily swung her legs, dress shoes tapping lightly against the floor mat. She wore a simple blue dress with a little white collar and had insisted on a yellow hairband, because it looks like sunshine. Harold sat beside her, wearing his best shirt, and an old tie that had seen more weddings and funerals than he cared to count. "You nervous?" Evan asked, glancing back at them. "Yes," they both answered at the same time. That made all three of them laugh. Evan turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, listening to the tick-tick-tick of the cooling car. "This is it," he said softly. Lily leaned forward between the seats and wrapped her arms around his neck from behind in a quick hug. "We're ready." He reached up and squeezed her hand. Inside the courthouse, the air smelled faintly of paper, old wood, and coffee that had been left too long on a burner. Their footsteps echoed in the hallway as they followed a clerk to a small family courtroom. It wasn't grand, no high drama, no crowd, just a judge at a wooden bench, a few chairs, and a quiet air of things that mattered happening in simple ways. When they entered, the judge looked up and smiled. She was in her 60s, with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back neatly. She wore her robe in a way that seemed more like a work coat than a symbol. "You must be the Bennett Carter family," she said. "Come on in, have a seat." They sat at a small table facing the bench, Evan in the middle, Harold on his right, Lily on his left. The lawyer sat near them, a neat folder open in front of him. "These are informal proceedings," the judge said kindly. "We're just going to talk a bit, and make sure everyone understands what they're asking for. No need to be scared." Lily nodded very seriously, though her hand found Evan's under the table and held it tight. The judge reviewed the papers quietly for a moment, then looked up. "So," she said, "we have a petition here for legal guardianship with potential future adoption. Mr. Bennett, you're Lily's maternal grandfather, and you're asking the court to recognize Mr. Carter here as Lily's legal guardian if anything happens to you. Is that right?" "Yes, Your Honor," Harold said. His voice shook just a little. "I'm still her primary caregiver. I'm not giving that up for as long as I can stand and walk, but I'm getting older. My heart isn't what it used to be. I've seen what happens to kids when there's no plan. I don't want that for her." The judge nodded gently. "I understand, and you trust Mr. Carter." "With my life," Harold said simply, "and more importantly with hers." The judge turned to Evan. "Mr. Carter, she said. You understand what you're petitioning for? Yes, Your Honor, he replied. If something happens to Harold, I want to be the one who takes care of Lily, not as a temporary step, as family. That's a serious commitment, she said. This isn't like being a weekend visitor or a friendly neighbor. It's a promise that doesn't end when things get difficult. I know, Evan said. His voice was calm, but inside he felt the weight of the moment. I've done a lot of things in my life that looked important on paper. This is the only thing that feels important in my heart. The judge's eyes softened. She looked at Lily. And what about you, young lady? Lily sat a little straighter. I want it, she said. I love my grandpa. I want him to be here for a long time. But if he has to go to heaven, I want Evan. Silence settled in the courtroom for a second, gentle and full. The judge smiled. Do you know what that means? It means, Lily said carefully, thinking it through, that Evan will be my almost dad who becomes my real dad if we need him to, and that he has to love me even when I'm grumpy. A small wave of laughter moved through the room. Even the court clerk smiled. The judge nodded. That's a very good understanding. She looked back at the file, then at the three of them. I see here, she said, that you've already been spending a lot of time together. School events, medical appointments, daily routines. Evan nodded. Yes, ma'am. We've built a life together. This is just catching the law up to reality. Well, the judge said, that's often what this place does at its best. She picked up a pen. I find that this arrangement is in Lily's best interest, she said. I find that Mr. Bennett is acting out of love and care, and that Mr. Carter understands the responsibility he's assuming. I hereby grant the guardianship petition as stated. She signed the last page, the sound of the pen scratching on paper small but sharp in the quiet room. That's it? Lily asked, eyes wide. It's real now. The judge smiled warmly. It's real. Lily looked from Harold to Evan and back again. Can I ask one more thing? She said. The judge tilted her head. You can ask. Does this mean, Lily asked carefully, I can call him Dad now? For real? The question landed with more weight than any legal ruling. Evan's throat closed for a second. He looked at Harold, who was already looking at him, eyes shining. I'd be honored, Evan said softly. The judge nodded. If that's what you all want, then yes, I'd say the paperwork and the people are in agreement. Lily scooted closer to Evan, slid her arms around his waist and pressed her face into his side. Okay then, she whispered. Dad. He closed his eyes for a moment, holding the word like something fragile and priceless. Hey kiddo, he whispered back, his voice rough. I'm here. Harold watched them, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. His face said enough. A few weeks later, they moved into the new house. It wasn't huge by the standards of the life Evan had once lived, but it was plenty for the three of them. A 2-story place in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of Harborview, with a small front porch, a patch of grass out front, and a backyard big enough for Lily to run around in. When they first pulled up in the truck, its engine humming more smoothly than it had in years, Lily bounced in her seat. This is it, she cried. This is our new house, our new home, Evan corrected gently. Harold sat in the passenger seat looking at the house quietly. His jaw worked. He was too proud to say it out loud, but the sight clearly moved him. You'll have your own room, Evan said to Lily, with a window that faces the backyard. And there's a little shed out back we can turn into a wood shop for Grandpa, if he wants. If he wants? Harold scoffed lightly. Is the sky blue? They spent the rest of the day carrying boxes inside, setting basic things in place. The living room filled up with a mix of Evan's simple furniture and Harold's older pieces, worn but sturdy. Lily claimed a corner for her art supplies, markers, paints, stacks of paper. Around late afternoon, Evan stepped out into the backyard. The lawn wasn't perfect. There were patches of uneven grass, a rough wooden fence and a few stubborn dandelions. But to him it looked like possibility. Lily ran past him in a wide circle, arms stretched out. I can do cartwheels here, she shouted. And we can have a picnic. And maybe a dog. Can we have a dog? One step at a time, Evan said, laughing. Let's figure out where the plates go first. Harold stood near the small shed, examining the door. This'll do just fine, he said. We can set up a little bench inside. Might need better lighting, but nothing a few fixtures can't fix. His voice sounded different, even though he tired easily now. There was a lightness to him, a sense of relief that he wouldn't have to worry about rent or a leaky roof or whether a bad month of work would threaten the basics. That night, after a simple dinner of sandwiches eaten on the living room floor because the table wasn't set up yet, they sat together among the half-unpacked boxes. Lily lay with her head in Evan's lap staring at the ceiling. "This doesn't feel real," she said. "What doesn't?" Evan asked, smoothing her hair back. "All of it," she said. "The house, the papers, our name on the mailbox, having a dad and a grandpa in the same house. It feels real to me," he said. "Feels like we stole it," she said. Not as a complaint but as a marvel. Harold chuckled from his armchair. "We didn't steal anything, kiddo. We just took a different road than most people." Evan thought about that long after Lily went to sleep in her new room and Harold shuffled off to his. He walked through the quiet house, turning off lights one by one, listening to the small sounds of a home settling, the creak of old boards, the distant hum of the fridge, the faint soft snore from Harold's room. The last light he turned off was in the hallway between their bedrooms. He stood there for a moment in the dimness, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not excitement, not adrenaline, not triumph, just peace. At the office, people began to notice changes in Evan. He still showed up. He still led meetings. He still cared deeply about the health of Carter Global Holdings. But there was a difference. His edges had softened, his focus had sharpened in places that mattered and blurred in places that didn't. In one board meeting, a month after the move, he stood at the head of the long table and looked each person in the eye. "We're going to make some changes," he said calmly. "Not just for the market, for our people." PowerPoint slides showed new programs, expanded parental leave, better health coverage, counseling support, emergency funds for employees in crisis. "Our employees are not just numbers," he said. "They're parents, caregivers, grandparents. They're people who get sick, who lose loved ones, who need help sometimes. We either stand by them or we don't deserve their work." A few board members worried about costs. Evan listened, answered, and stayed steady. "I've spent too many years trying to fill a hole inside me with success," he said quietly. "It doesn't work. What does work is building something that takes care of people. We're not going to be the kind of company that squeezes every drop and leaves them to bleed." No one argued with him after that. Maybe it was his tone, maybe it was the confidence behind his words. Maybe it was because for the first time in a long time he was leading from something deeper than fear. About a year after his first meeting with Harold and Lily, Carter Global announced a new initiative, the Carter Bennett Foundation. The foundation would support grandparents raising grandchildren, single parents and children who had lost a parent. It would offer scholarships, emergency assistance, and small community grants. At the announcement event, held in a modest auditorium, Evan stood behind a simple podium. The foundation's logo, a stylized image of three figures holding hands, was projected behind him. "People like me get a lot of credit," he said, adjusting the microphone. "We're called self-made and driven and all kinds of fancy words. But I've learned something in the last few years: no one is self-made. We're shaped by the people who show up when we need them." He glanced at the front row. Harold sat there, wearing a jacket that fit a little too big, his tie crooked, his eyes bright. Lily sat next to him, swinging her legs, wearing a dress with small sunflowers. "I met a man and his granddaughter in a coffee shop," Evan continued. "They didn't know who I was. They didn't want anything from me. They just helped me when I spilled my coffee, asked if I was okay, and shared a birthday cupcake with me." A soft murmur went through the crowd. "That small act of kindness," Evan said, "changed everything about how I see my life. This foundation is named for them because they helped me understand what real wealth looks like." He paused, emotion tightening his throat. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Real wealth is a child's laughter in a house that's finally paid for. It's a grandfather who can rest without wondering what will happen to his grandchild. It's having someone to sit with you when you're scared, or tired, or lonely." He stepped back from the podium to a warm, honest round of applause. Afterward, as people mingled, a reporter approached Harold. "How does it feel," she asked him, "to have a foundation partly named after you?" Harold scratched his cheek, embarrassed. "I told him he didn't need to put my name on anything." Harold said, "He told me it was already there, whether I liked it or not. Kids like Lily, and people like me, we're everywhere. We're not looking for our names on walls, we're just trying to get by. If this helps, then it's enough. Lily tugged on Evan's sleeve. I liked your speech, she said. You didn't sound like a robot. High praise, he replied with a smile. You talked about us, she added. But you didn't make it all mushy. I tried not to, he said. She gave his hand a squeeze. You did good, Dad. Those 3 words made the whole event worth more than every investor's handshake. Time moved forward in its quiet, steady way. Harbor View changed a little, new paint on old buildings, a few new shops along the main street, but its heart stayed the same. The harbor still reflected the sky in rippling lines. The cafe still smelled like coffee and cinnamon. The same bell still jingled over the door when people walked in. Evan, Harold and Lily built their own rhythms. School mornings with cereal and mismatched socks. Evenings with homework spread across the kitchen table. Weekends with small projects, fixing a loose step, planting flowers, learning how to grill without burning everything. Harold's health stabilized. He was slower than before, needed more breaks, but he was there, present, grateful. Sometimes in quiet moments, Evan caught him watching Lily with a look that mixed relief and wonder. She's going to be all right, Harold said one evening, as they sat on the back porch watching Lily chase bubbles in the fading light. She already is, Evan replied. He meant it. One Sunday afternoon, almost exactly 2 years after that first spilled coffee, they walked together into Sunrise Brew Cafe. It had become their tradition, church in the morning, a walk by the harbor, then coffee and hot chocolate at the cafe. The staff knew them now. The baristas smiled when they walked in. There was usually a table waiting for them in the corner. That day, the cafe hummed with its usual warmth. Quiet jazz, clinking cups, low conversation. The smell of pastries floated in the air, sweet and familiar. They ordered their usual drinks. Evan stood at the counter with Harold, while Lily wandered a bit ahead, looking at the pastry case. He noticed her stop suddenly. She was looking at a man sitting alone near the back wall. He wore a suit jacket that looked slightly rumpled, his tie loosened. His hair was graying at the temples, and his eyes were fixed on the empty space in front of him. A half-drunk cup of coffee sat on the table. A file folder lay open, papers spread out like storm debris. Even from where he stood, Evan could see the man's shoulders slumped in a way he recognized all too well. Lily glanced back at Evan, then up at Harold. Her expression was thoughtful. Dad, she called softly, waiting for him to join her. He walked over. The man at the table didn't look up. He was somewhere far away, inside his own head. Look at him, Lily said quietly. He looks like you did. That simple sentence landed with weight. Evan followed her gaze. The man's face was drawn, tired, as if he hadn't slept well in weeks. His hand rested near his cup, fingers tapping once, stopping, tapping again. Like I did when, Evan asked, though he already knew. The first time we met you, she said. When you dropped your phone. You looked like that, like your heart was hiding. Harold came up behind them slowly. She's got an eye for it, he said. Some folks do. Lily turned to Evan. Can I go talk to him? She asked. Evan thought of that first day. Of Harold stepping in to clean the spill. Of Lily's small serious face when she'd looked up at him and said, Are you okay, mister? He felt something gentle and strong move through him. Yes, he said quietly. I think you should. Lily nodded, as if she had expected that answer all along. She walked over to the man's table and stopped a respectful distance away. Excuse me, she said softly. The man didn't answer. She tried again, a little louder. Excuse me, sir. He blinked and looked up, as if waking up from a dream. Oh, he said. I'm sorry. Yes. You look sad, Lily said. Her voice was simple, not accusing. Just noticing. Are you okay, sir? The words hung in the air. The man stared at her, caught off guard. For a moment he didn't know what to do. His mouth opened and closed once, like he was testing whether he could still speak. He began, then stopped. Evan watched from a few steps away, his heart beating slowly and heavily. Lily waited. I've had better days, the man said. Finally, his voice was low and tired. I'm fine though, you don't need to worry about me. Sometimes people say they're fine when they're not. Lily replied. My grandpa says when you see someone who looks sad, you should help them first, and then ask if they're okay. So I'm starting backwards. The man gave a short, surprised laugh. a real sound, rough and unfinished. "What's your name?" she asked. "Robert," he replied. "Robert Wilson." "I'm Lily," she said. "That's my dad over there. And that's my grandpa. They're good at helping people too." Robert glanced past her at Evan and Harold. He looked like he wanted to wave, but his hand stayed near his cup. "I don't want to be a bother," he said. "You're not a bother," Lily replied. "We have extra kindness." Evan stepped closer then, giving the man space but not distance. "Mind if we join you?" he asked. Robert hesitated, then nodded. "Sure," he said. "Why not?" They pulled over a couple of chairs. Harold sat with a soft sigh, leaning his cane against the table. Evan sat next to Lily. For a moment the four of them simply shared the quiet. "Rough week?" Evan asked gently. Robert exhaled. "Rough month, rough year." Evan nodded. "I understand that." Robert glanced at him, something like curiosity flickering in his eyes. "You do, more than you might think," Evan said. He told the story simply, no drama, no extra shine, just the facts. A birthday alone, a hostile business move, a fiancé who chose someone else. The coldness of success that didn't share your table. And then he said, "I dropped my phone, spilled my coffee and met them." He nodded toward Lily and Harold. "They sat with me when they didn't have to," he said. "They shared a cupcake, they asked if I was okay and actually wanted to know the answer. That small kindness changed everything about my life." Robert listened, his hand still. "I can't promise your story will go exactly like mine," Evan said, "but I can tell you this, letting someone help you isn't weakness. It's a chance to start over." He pulled a small card from his wallet and slid it across the table. "I run a foundation now," he said. "We help families in tough spots, people who feel like they've run out of options. If you ever want to talk or need support, call this number. Ask for me. I'll make time." Robert stared at the card, then at Evan. "Why?" he asked. "You don't even know me." "Because someone once helped me when they didn't know me either," Evan replied. "And I owe the world a few favors now." Lily leaned forward. "Also," she added, "you just look like you need someone to tell you you're not alone." Robert's eyes grew shiny. He blinked quickly and cleared his throat, looking down at his hands. "Thank you," he said, voice hoarse. "That means more than you know." They didn't push him after that. They just sat, sharing the air, the light and the gentle noise of the cafe. Sometimes, kindness was simply staying where someone could see you were willing to be there. When it was time for them to go, Robert stood as they did. "I'll think about calling," he said. "Thinking is a good start," Harold replied. "Just don't think so long that you talk yourself out of it." Robert gave him a faint, grateful smile. As they stepped toward the door, Lily turned back. "Hey Robert," she called. He looked up. "Yeah?" "Just in case no one's asked you the right way," she said. "I'm going to ask again." She took a small breath, squared her shoulders and said, with the same simple honesty she had used on another man 2 years before, "Are you okay, mister?" Robert stared at her for a second. Then very slowly he shook his head. "No," he said. "Not really." Then Lily replied kindly, "I'm glad we met you today." She gave a small wave and followed her family out. Outside, the light in Harborview was just as soft as it had been that first day, but everything felt different now. They walked together down the sidewalk. Harold's steps steady but careful, Evan's hand resting lightly on Lily's shoulder, Lily chattering about nothing and everything. Evan listened to the rise and fall of her voice, to the sound of Harold's chuckle, to the distant call of seagulls over the harbor. He thought about the man inside the cafe, about the version of himself that might still be sitting alone at that table if Harold and Lily hadn't stepped in that day. He thought about how small acts of kindness, wiping up a spill, sharing a cupcake, asking a simple question, could ripple out into a whole new life. As they reached the corner, Lily slipped her hand into his. "Dad?" she asked. "Yeah," he answered. "Do you think we really helped him today?" "I do," Evan said. "Even if he doesn't call." "Even then," he replied, "sometimes just being seen is the first step." She seemed satisfied with that. They crossed the street together, the afternoon sun stretching their shadows ahead of them. The harbor glittered in the distance, the water moving in gentle waves, steady and endless. Evan took a slow breath and felt once again that deep inner peace settle over him. He had money, he had a company, he had a house. But more than that, he had this, a child's small hand in his, an old man's steady presence at his side, and a life held together, not by contracts or numbers, but by kindness freely given and gratefully received. As they walked toward home, he realized that his entire world, everything he cared about, everything that mattered, had grown out of 4 small words spoken by a little girl, in a cafe, on the worst day of his life. "Are you okay, mister?" As they continued down the familiar sidewalk, Lily hopped over a line in the pavement, as if avoiding a river, only she could see. Harold followed at a slower pace, his hand brushing along the top of a wooden fence as he walked. He always said the imperfect boards reminded him that things didn't have to be flawless to hold up a home. The breeze shifted, carrying with it the faint sound of a guitar from a porch somewhere down the block. A neighbor waved. Lily waved back with both hands, as if her arms were trying to catch the sunlight and share it with everyone she saw. Evan slipped his other hand into his jacket pocket and felt the slight crinkle of the business card he'd given Robert. He wondered whether the man would call. He hoped he would, but he knew now that help could never be forced. It had to be given gently, offered like an open door. The person on the other side had to decide when to walk through it. "Dad?" Lily said suddenly. He looked down. "Yeah?" She walked closer until she was leaning lightly against him as they moved. "Do you think kindness gets tired?" she asked. The question surprised him. "What do you mean?" She shrugged one shoulder. "I just wonder if it ever runs out, for people." Evan thought about that, about the years he had spent giving pieces of himself away to people who never gave anything back. About Harold trying to carry more weight than his aging heart should have. About Robert sitting alone in that cafe with a folder full of broken pieces. And then he thought of Lily, how she offered kindness without fear of losing it. How Harold had given it even when life had taken so much from him. How his own life had changed the moment he allowed someone else's kindness to reach him. "No," he said gently. "I don't think kindness runs out, I think it grows. The more you share it, the more you have." Lily smiled at that, one of those small thoughtful smiles that made her look older for a moment, like she understood something most adults had forgotten. Harold caught up to them, and tapped his cane lightly on the sidewalk. "You two saving the world up here without me." "Just talking," Evan said. "Good, talking is how people stay close," Harold said. "Stops us from getting lonely in our own heads." They turned onto their street, the late afternoon sun painting long shadows ahead of them. Evan noticed the chalk drawings Lily had made the week before were still faintly visible on the sidewalk. Smudged suns, big uneven hearts, and 3 stick figures holding hands. Rain hadn't washed them away completely. Somehow that felt fitting. As they reached the front gate, Lily suddenly tugged their arms, pulling both men to a stop. "Wait," she said. "Let's take a picture." "A picture?" Evan asked, amused. "Yeah," she said. "So next time someone looks sad, we can show them what kindness makes." Harold chuckled. "Pretty wise for someone who thinks geese are ducks." "They act like ducks," she insisted. Evan laughed and took out his phone. Lily squeezed between them, her arms wrapped tightly around their waists. Harold leaned in, the sun catching the silver strands in his hair. Evan held the phone out, angling it just right. The 3 of them smiled, not perfect, not posed, just real. A moment held still, a moment made of simple kindness that had become something larger than any of them expected. When the shutter clicked, Lily let out a satisfied breath. "There," she said. "Now we're official." Evan looked at the picture, then at the little family beside him. "Yeah," he whispered, "we are." And as they walked into the warm light of their home, Evan felt certain deep down, steady and sure, that kindness wasn't just something that changed his life. It was something meant to be passed on. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.